From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Hello, I'm Eugene Flanagan, Director of National Programs at the Library of Congress, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here this afternoon to Spotlight on Native Writers. The event is sponsored by the Library's Poetry and Literature Center, home to, among other programs, the Library of Congress Prize for American Fiction, presented in 2010 to Louise Erdrich. Last fall, Erdrich participated in a terrific session at the National Book Festival, and we are excited to have today's event occurring in conjunction with Erdrich's return to the Capitol for the debut of her new novel. And you'll hear more about that later from Rob Casper, the head of the center. Spotlight on Native Writers gives the Library of Congress an opportunity to feature a few of the many essential Native literary voices active today. And Erdrich has prefaced today's event with the observation that, and I quote, "Bringing our contemporary Native stories to life in one of our country's greatest institutions is a worthy and delightful enterprise." Helping us today in that enterprise, that delightful enterprise, right, are our four guests, three on the stage now. Eric Gansworth is an artist and author of 10 novels and a play. In the fall, Eric will be the NEH Visiting Professor of Native American Studies at Colgate University. His next novel is Give Me Some Truth. Linda LeGarde Grover is a writer and poet and the winner of the Flannery O'Connor Award. Linda is a professor of American Indian Studies at the University of Minnesota, Duluth, and her next poetry collection is titled The Sky Watched. Stephen Graham Jones is the author of 16 novels and 6 short story collections. Stephen teaches in the FMA programs at the University of Colorado at Boulder and the University of California, Riverside Palm Desert, and his current novel is Mongrels. Following readings by Eric, Linda, and Stephen, we will have a moderated discussion led by poet and scholar Deborah Miranda. Deborah is the John Lucian Smith Jr. Professor of English at Washington and Lee University and author of 3 books of poetry. Her next book is a collection of essays, The Hidden Stories of Isabel Meadows and Other California India Lacunae. But before we start, some logistics. Please turn off your cell phones and all electronic devices. If you have questions during the Q&A portion of the program, please wait for us to give you a portable mic. Also, please note that by participating in the Q&A session, you give the library permission to include you in future audio and webcasts. And when the program concludes, there will be a book signing by all of our authors at the back of the room, with Josh there. And to find out more about the Poetry and Literature Center in general, or this program, please visit our website at loc.gov/poetry. But now, please join me in welcoming Eric Gansworth, Linda LeGarde Grover, Stephen Graham Jones, and Deborah Miranda.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. Thank you to the Library of Congress for inviting me to participate in this event. It's really delightful to be here on the same occasion as Louise's new novel being launched, which I'm sure many people are very excited about, as much as I am. I'm going to read an excerpt from a forthcoming novel, Give Me Some Truth. It is a follow-up to my last novel, If I Ever Get Out of Here. I'm working on a 4-novel sequence of Beatles books. I'm not really sure what's going to happen when we get to Ringo, but so this is the first chapter from this narrator's point of view. This is the John and Yoko book, so they get equal billing. And so this is from a 15-year-old girl who is a bead worker. "Are you from an Indian reservation near here?" the new groom asked, while his bride eyed up a pair of beadwork dangle earrings from our display. "Technically," my sister Marie said. Immediately, new groom's ears perked up. He clearly didn't want to be buying fake Indian goods. "Either you are or you aren't Indian, isn't that right?" he asked. Our mom was walking back from the ladies' room 500,000 miles from our vendor's table. Marie never engaged in her mild sabotage when our mom was around. It was Memorial Day weekend, the beginning of our season selling handmade Indian souvenirs at Niagara Falls State Park. We personally enforced our tribal treaties with the likes of New York State. It gives you a sense of power in your otherwise woefully powerless 15-year-old girl life. "Oh yeah, we are definitely Indian," Marie said. "Don't my beautiful red skin prove it?" New groom was edgy, but new bride had already locked her tractor beam eyes on the earrings. "We just don't live on the reservation anymore, but I wish we did. Most of our family does, and I'm tired of living in the city," Marie said, suddenly switching to her forlorn tone. Our mom greeted our potential customers with the humble Indian craftsperson face she'd mastered years ago. "We long to be among our people," I said, going along with Marie. Trying out new routines could be fun. "So why aren't you among your people?" New groom asked. A lot of tourists asked this pushy question, testing to see if we were real Indians. Our vendor permit was pinned to the appropriately Indian Pendleton covering our table. The Parks Department required it be visible at all times. The permit, not the Pendleton. "Sad fact," I said, adopting my own version of forlorn Indian. "Indians, they don't buy much beadwork." A little lie. They tended to buy only a certain kind of beadwork. Keychains, trucker caps or baseball caps, disposable lighter cases, bingo bags, and eyeglass cases. So here we are, building bridges to the larger culture with our art. I modeled my look on the crying anti-pollution TV Indian. "This brooch is designed by my elders to go with the earrings." I slid a little basswood carving forward. My dad made it last week. The expression on new bride's face said she couldn't see herself in this combo. She didn't love Indians that much. "This is our specialty," I added, revealing one of our canoes, which I did whenever I saw that expression. In my best mystical Indian voice, all clipped consonants and draggy vowels, the works, I said, "Each Indian family has their own signature. Ours is the double heart canoe. Very popular among honeymooners." This was a phrase I usually closed the deal with, chopping out my Y's and pronouncing popular like a variety of tree. You can spot honeymooner hands immediately. New bride usually fans her fingers like piano players, hoping you'll ask about her engagement ring so she can tell you all the carats and setting. New groom is usually spinning his new ring with his thumb, the way you might absently work a burst blister. They wanted something we could provide. Maintaining our tables, we kept the Porter Agreement alive. You can bet official parks vendors had tried for years to justify breaking that treaty. What I had said, though a sales pitch, was still true. The double heart canoe was our signature item. You do best with something that's like traditional Indian beadwork, but that also commemorates something for the tourists. I helped design this. My family developed the beadwork equivalent of the concert t-shirt, with tour dates and cities on the back. You see, Niagara Falls is official honeymoon capital of the world. I'm not sure why a giant waterfall above a bunch of sharp rocks made that cut. Maybe because when people get married, they say they're taking the plunge. Together, we came up with this killer idea for the tchotchke-inclined newlywed tourist. My dad made little birch bark canoes that my mom stuffed 2 plump velvet heart pincushions inside of. We beaded the hearts with a date and initials while the customer watched. I've carved so many initials and hash marks into little hearts that I could maybe qualify as a graffiti-minded cardiac surgeon. Despite our signature, our mom left our dad to his res shack when I was 8. Our apartment was in something called the projects, which made it seem like we lived in a classroom science experiment. Add an Indian woman and her kids to a set of low-rent apartment buildings, jammed with too many people, all colors except white. What happens? Do they bind and make a new substance? If so, is it like epoxy or acid? Even after we moved out, my parents shared the treaty-insured vendor permit, and my mom still sold my dad's work, since you needed a res address to apply for the permit. At first, they refused to collaborate on the double heart canoes. They each insisted they were stuck with the hard part and thus should get a bigger cut. None of us kids dared suggest we had the hardest part. Though it was true, we had to chit-chat with the newly in-love couples while we maimed velvet hearts for them. The city wasn't a bad place to finish out school, and we did the same vendor table gig we'd always done in the summers. It was like being near a satellite reservation, at least in the summertime. The reservation-heavy tavern softball league teams played in a park near the projects. There were worse ways to spend your summer evenings than watching men in tight uniforms running around every now and then rearranging their favorite equipment inside those tight pants. "Oh, hun," new bride said, "isn't this the cutest?" While new groom glanced at the canoe, suddenly searching for a hang tag to see what it was going to cost. "We could smudge it with some tobacco," Marie said, reaching under the table for her purse where I knew she had a pack of Cools. "Get you off on the right foot for a lifetime of happiness." "Is that extra?" new groom asked. He had not yet learned his lines. "My daughter jokes," our mom said, kicking Marie under the table, just like on a sitcom, except there was no joke there, no stunt kicks. "We do, though, offer to bead your initials and the date, usually $10 extra, but this beautiful Memorial Day," she said, opening her arms wide to provide her generosity, "we give you that part for free." "Oh, hun," new bride said, and new groom got out his wallet. "My blushing bride here," he said, grabbing her shoulders and squeezing her close to him. "She's a DAR, so her mother wanted us to get married on the 4th of July. "Dar?" our mom said, burning through her gas tank of charm. "Your name's Darlene? Darla?" "DAR," new bride said, giggling, "Daughters of the American Revolution." "It was important to my mother," she hastened to add. "My parents wanted us to get married on the 4th of July, invite all their other DAR friends. We're from Concord." Apparently that was supposed to mean something to us, but we're not really like that. Then she leaned in conspiratorially. "We eloped to avoid a big production. So nice to have a memento. If they want to throw us a reception on Independence Day, great, but we get to be married where and when we want." "We got beaded picture frames too," I said to new groom, up in the ante. "Make great thank you gifts for your new in-laws. Got some here with 2 beaded birds, like love birds. I hated using poor grammar, but it tended to make the sales smoother." I revealed an elaborate velvet and beadwork picture frame. The bride ran her fingers over the rich velvet, leaving little trails. "I could even bead a couple little bees on it," I said, joining her giggle, "since this is your honeymoon." "Birds and bees," new groom grinned. "Not sure your mother would care for that." He laughed. "My mom was about to blow a gasket thinking I'd lost the sale." "Might be kind of a fun secret joke," he added. "How long before it could be ready?" 15 minutes, I said. I could do this beading in my sleep. "Half hour," our mom interrupted, handing the double heart canoe to Marie and digging out her receipt book. "My daughters work quick, but it's very trick of work," she said, doing a double drop Y as I had. I made big eyes at Marie. My mom asked for 50% down since we couldn't sell it to anyone else with their initials on it. The groom, still chuckling about the secret sexy joke he'd be playing on his mother-in-law, said he'd pay in full. When our mom got their initials for the custom beading, she showed him the receipt with $100 in the total line. His eyes bugged, but I was already breaking out my yellow and black beads to do a couple quick bumbles. He paid, and they watched their art being created right before their eyes, commemorating their day.
Bonjour everybody, Linda Grover and Dashinikaz, Asianaquad. And I'm going to read the introductory part to my book, The Road Back to Sweetgrass, and then a part of a chapter depending on how the time looks. So we start out this way. The introduction is called the Odissima Bag. Today, the opening day of the Moje Point Ojibwe Reservation's wild rice harvest, cumulus clouds drift slowly over the boat landing on Lost Lake, bringing with them the scent of sweetgrass. Among the ricers who pause to inhale the blessing are a teenage boy and his father who park at the side of the road in a gray primered Ford truck faded to the near no color of glass. A young married couple who argue as they carry her parents' canoe toward the water, and an elderly woman who has just placed a pot of coffee to boil on an old car grill over a campfire. On this western edge of Mauget, it happens that way occasionally when the wind comes from the northeast. The scent of sweetgrass edging and swirling from the LaForce family allotment land, its source somewhere near the maple sugar bush, making its invisible way past the cabin and down the driveway to the road, where it dissipates and fades when it reaches the boat landing. The Mauget Point ricers, who know that no sweetgrass grows on the LaForce land, even in the swamp on the far side of the allotment, occasionally stop in their work to wonder about this. But the scent reminds us that we have been blessed by the Creator in all ways, understood or otherwise, here during our time on Mother Earth, and so we accept the mystery for what it is. And yet, in the old muskrat family sugar bush, there near the middle of the land, that more than a century ago became the LaForce family land allotment, is where spirits tread so lightly that their feet, transparent as the air, make no more mark on the ground than air itself. With every step, the scent, invisibly compressed and released, renews and rises into the LaForce allotment atmosphere. And below the earth that is covered by leaves in fall, snow in winter, mud in spring, and sparse northern moss in summer, a small deerskin bag sewn with red thread and blue beads holds an infant's umbilical cord, an odissima, wrapped in dried sweetgrass. This chapter is called In Her Dream, Margie. The young Margie Robineau, moving through the landscape of her early morning dreams, knew as well as would a much older woman all the songs and where they ended. She had danced this one 100 times. As it neared the tail, the last minute of the fugue of drumbeat and voices, she danced nearer to the men at the drum, who in anticipation of the quickening of the pace leaned forward on their folding chairs. The lead singer bent to pick a styrofoam cup up from the floor with his left hand, his right hand holding the drumstick in midair as he swallowed a mouthful of water between skipped beats. He cupped his left hand to hear his ear as he raised his voice, the pitch a wolf singing into the wind, striking the drum harder with every other beat, volume muffled by the sheepskin wrapping on the end of the drumstick to a deep boom, felt by the girl who was Margie Endish, at the back of the curved arabesque of her ribs as she danced. She watched Joash's head bob now, his white hair reflecting the fluorescent lighting of the gymnasium ceiling to the silver of Lost Lake under a full moon in winter, now, as the fugue bent, dipped, turned the corner into the tail of the song. Now. The girl's gaze turned from the singers to the blur of the powwow circle, then inward. Her feet stayed with the drum, out of her sight but seen in her mind as she danced, moccasins beaded with blue skies and rivers, green leaves and vines, flowers the color of late summer, prancing and stepping, kicking and turning, sending her prayers to the Creator by way of skies and rivers, leaves, vines, and flowers of late summer. When the song ended, her practiced feet hit the ground on the last beat, side by side, together, toes first, heels grounded on the last split second. Hey, what? Joash didn't say it out loud. She woke to the hesitant gurgle of the toilet flushing weak and thin on the other side of her bedroom wall as the middle-aged Margie, who duct-taped her arch supports into her dance boots as she dressed for grand entry, and who needed more than 6 hours of sleep. Half opening her eyes to the osmotic fogginess of the beginnings of illumination, that gray light that seeks into rooms where morning sleepers endeavor to extend the night, she blinked at probing fingers of reality, forcing daylight through slats of drawn vinyl window blinds, prying apart the crack between drawn curtains. Did I dance like that? She wondered. Am I young? No, she remembered. I have a daughter older than I was in the dream. Crystal jiggled the flush handle to stop the irritatingly apologetic sound of the running toilet. She coughed, deep and dry. Rustled cellophane, her pack of Camels. Lit a match, sucked smoke, exhaled. Passing the bedroom door, she looked in to see if her mother was awake. Her left hand was cupped over her mouth, cigarette between her second and third fingers, filter close to her lips. Margie saw an old man's silhouette, short-legged and skinny, with those stringy, muscular arms, standing in the doorway to the bedroom, gray and indistinct. An apparition. Joash? Margie rubbed the back of her wrist against her eyes. The apparition stretched, crossed its wrists above its head, and became her daughter. Oh, I'm in Aunt Beryl's trailer, she remembered, not in the allotment house. I live here. Jo lives at the hospital in convalescent care. You up? Crystal asked. How late did you work? Oh, almost 2. Busy at Chihuahua last night. Where were you? Out. With who? Just out. She glared at her mother. None of your business. Did you find out about blackjack training? Coughed, dropped her cigarette. Watch the rug. No, they haven't decided yet if they're going to have the class. Where's Auntie Beryl? Down at the boat landing. Hey, I'm going to go down there, see if I can find a racing partner. Can I borrow the rowboat? Use Michael's stuff, his duckbill and knockers? I know he's not there. I'm broke. You look like hell. Who would want to race with you? Are you hungover? Oh, what do you think? Crystal gulped, swallowing back the dry heaves. Well, go ahead. It's Michael's stuff, not mine. Take whatever you want. He's not around. The young woman went back into Beryl's frilly bathroom. She ran water noisily into the sink while she retched, took deep breaths to settle her stomach. Oh, Pepto-Bismol, she thought. There was a bottle in the medicine cabinet. She took 2 chalky peppermint swallows from the bottle and retched again, knelt on the floor to see if she had heaved pink liquid on the matching shag bath mat. She held a wet washcloth over her face, counted to 10, and cautiously stood. Lifting the washcloth, she saw herself, slack-faced, staring out of the mirror with eyes that looked like 2 pea holes in the snow, as Margie would say. Above the reflection's shoulder, 2 impossibly pretty Indians embraced, a vaguely effeminate brave and a Nordic-featured princess simpering in front of a pink and gold sunset. Auntie Beryl had won the laminated plaque at Saturday Night Fever bingo and hung it in the bathroom where it could be seen twice, on the wall and in the mirror. Yuck, she muttered. She sipped water from the plastic cup shaped like a rosebud. Crystal, her mother said when she came out of the bathroom, I've been thinking about us moving back into the allotment house. Michael is just about never there, and even when he is, he sleeps in the shed most of the time anyway. It doesn't even have a furnace. But even in winter, it's plenty warm with the wood stove, and then we'd have our own place. We did fine there before we moved in with Auntie Beryl. We could take care of it, you and me. It just needs a little work. And take a chance into running into Michael, that bum who couldn't be bothered by his own daughter. It's a wreck. It has raccoons under the stairs. God, no thanks. Let Michael deal with that place. Beryl needs you here. Oh, now while the weather's still nice, we could try it again, Crystal. Do a little work, get it ready for the winter. Joash would like that. God, I'm going to the landing. Crystal picked up her cigarettes and lighter from the kitchen counter and walked out, letting the door slam. At the bottom of the steps, she spun around and went back into the kitchen to take her plaid flannel shirt from the hook by the door and a piece of leftover fry bread from the bowl on the table. That's yesterday's, cautioned Margie. I'll eat it before I get to the road. Crystal squeezed her mother's shoulder. You know the cabin's a dump. See you later. At the bottom of the stairs, she called back. They better let you into blackjack training, those bastards. If they're letting Teresa do it, they better let you too. She walked as she always did, quickly, impatiently, with a long, short-legged stride down the driveway and to the road. As Margie absent-mindedly bit into a piece of day-old fry bread, she wondered to herself when the cabin's barrel stove had been last cleaned and if the back door had been properly latched. One of the worst things to do once it gets cold, clean up after a dirty stove in a freezing room, she said to herself. Even worse if a raccoon gets in. She microwaved a cup of instant coffee, positioned her arch supports into Joash's old moccasins that waited for her feet. Then, still in her pajamas, sat outside on the log-splitting stump, dunking day-old fry bread and contemplating the cut-off path that led from Barrel's trailer back to the LaForce allotment house. Miigwech, thank you.
Hello, y'all can hear me, huh? All right. You'll notice I skated in at the last possible moment. There was a lot of knife drama with getting into this building, evidently, you know? But nobody got cut or threatened or anything. Really, it was when Rob showed up in my inbox asking me to come here, like I had the idea that the Library of Congress was like an abstract. I thought it was an idea. I didn't know it was a physical place, you know? So coming here, it's like I'm going to a fake, I'm like stepping into a platonic ideal, kind of, and it's kind of cool. I like it. Thank y'all for coming out. Thank y'all for hosting. This is really a cool thing to do. And I will read y'all a little bit from my new novel, Mongrels. And also thank y'all for letting me read here, because I get to hang out with my editor who got the book for like 3 minutes. I get to see her later. It's going to be cool, you know? This is, all you need to know at this point in the novel is werewolves are real, and there's an uncle named Darren, an aunt named Libby, and a kid. He's 14 years old. He's waiting to see if he's got the blood or not, if he's werewolf or not. All right. And I forgot my glasses, and so this could be fun. And I'm on the wrong page too. Hold on. This is only my third time to read from this book. Today is the actual official launch date for this book. Thank you. This is from a chapter titled American Ninja. Did y'all watch American Ninja coming up, any of y'all? Yeah. Michael Dudikoff, he can kick like anybody in the face, and that solves all problems, man. It's pretty cool. All right. We're werewolves. Each night at dusk, one of us leans out the door to burn the trash, just because we all know what can happen if that trash is left in the kitchen. Somebody will go wolf in the night. And because shifting burns up every last bit of fat reserves you have, and even leaves you in the hole for more, the first thing you think once you're a wolf, the only thing you can think if you're just starting out, is food. It's not a choice, it's just survival. You eat whatever's there, and fast, be it the people sleeping around you at the rest stop, or, if you got a trailer rented for 4 months, the kitchen trash. It sounds stupid, but it's true. When we first open our eyes as werewolves, the trash is so fragrant, so perfect, so right there. Except, there's things in there you can't digest. I don't care how bad you are. Ever wake with the ragged lid of a tin can in your gut? Darren says it's like a circle saw blade in first gear. But it's only because you're so delicate in the morning, so human. Even a twist tie can stab through the lining of your stomach. The wolf doesn't know any better, just knows to eat it all, and fast, and now. Come daylight, though, so many werewolves die this way, Libby had told me. So many die with a broke-tined fork stabbing them open from the inside, with a discarded but whole beef rib pushing through their spleen, their pancreas. She said she'd even heard of somebody dying from a house dog that had had its pelvis put together with a metal rod. That metal rod, it went down the wolf's throat fine, along with the crunchy domestic bones, but in the morning, for the man, it was a spear. Libby had stopped meaningfully on spear, settled me in her stare to make sure I was paying the right kind of attention. I had been, sort of. Because I was sure I was going to shift just any night now, was going to pad on all fours down the long hall from my bedroom at any moment, sniff at the coffee table, then turn my attention to the much richer scent of the kitchen, because that was definitely going to happen. I always lugged the trash out. Never mind that Libby had always been careful to not leave steel wool or bleach containers in there. Never mind that we kept a jug of black pepper right there on the counter to sprinkle onto the trash as it built through the day. I'd be able to smell through that, I knew. I was going to be that kind of werewolf. in spite of Libby's prayers. The life she wanted for me, it was a life my mom should have had, the life that, her not being a werewolf, should have been mine by birthright. But something had gone haywire. Just once or just waiting, though? That was the part her and Darren couldn't figure. I had the blood, but was that blood ever going to rise? Or had it been a one-time thing? With Grandpa 5 years gone, there weren't even any old-timers to ask. Had this happened before? Had there ever been somebody like me? There had to have been. Werewolves have always been here. Every variation of us, it has to have happened at some point. It's the remembering that's tricky. Until we knew for sure one way or the other, Libby was packing my head with facts, like trying to scare me back across the line. Driving here from East Texas, the big Delta 88 eating up the miles, the trunk empty because all our stuff had burned a move or two ago, she'd evened her voice out to sound like a safety pamphlet and recounted all the ways we usually die. It was the werewolf version of the talk, just with more dead bodies. It took nearly the whole 10 hours, no radio, no books, nothing. I stared a hole into the dashboard, not wanting to let her see how perfect all this was, how much I was loving every single wonderful fact. She'd already told me about the trash. The rest, though, being a werewolf, it's a game of Russian roulette, Darren would say. It's waking up every morning with that gun to your temple, and then he'd snap his teeth over the end of that sentence and give a yip or two, and I'd have to look away so Libby wouldn't see me smiling. I wanted to be him so bad. But trash isn't the only way we go. The modern world, it's custom designed to kill werewolves. There's French fries, for one. The idea, Libby said, switching hands on the Delta 88's thin steering wheel and staring straight ahead, boring holes into the night with her eyes. The idea is werewolves think they'll burn all those calories up the next time they shift. And they're not wrong. You burn up your French fry calories and more. But calories aren't the dangerous part of the French fry. The dangerous part of the French fry is that once you have a taste for them, then running around in a pasture one night, chasing wild boar or digging up rabbits or whatever, all honest work, you'll catch that salty scent on the air. If you still had your human mind, you'd know not to chase that scent down. You'd know better. You're not thinking like that, though. You run like smoke through the trees, over the fences, and when you find those French fries, they're usually on a picnic table in some deserted place, which is the dream, right? Except for the couple sitting on opposite sides of that picnic table. They can be young and broke, having had to dig into couches for enough change for this weekly basket of fries to split out of their favorite place. Or they can be the 50-year anniversary set, indulging themselves on exactly the kind of greasy fat they're under strict orders to stay away from. What they should really stay away from, it turns out, it's eating those French fries out in the open. They don't know they live in a world with werewolves, and by the time they do know, it's too late. Blind with hunger, you barrel up onto that table and snatch the fries in a single motion, have eaten them bag and all by the time that picnic table's 2 leaping bounds behind you. At which point you register that distinct flavor of salt on this couple's fingertips as well, around their lips. Your paws skid in the gravel, the dust under that gravel rising in a plume you're about to rip open and explode back through. The newspaper the next day won't show crime scene photos of the remains or the blood-splashed picnic table. You won't need them. You'll have those photographs in your head already. In those kind of visual flashes Darren says you get in the daytime, like half-remembered dreams. And you'll think, French fries. And the next time you follow that salty scent in from the pasture, an honest rabbit dangling limp from either side of your jaws, that 2-lane highway you have to cross to get to that tanginess, maybe this time there'll be a semi hurtling down the near lane, its grill guard thick and purposeful. Or there'll be men on the roof of the cinder block bathroom, their scoped rifles waiting, obituaries folded in their tall leather wallets. I'm going to skip a page here because I don't want to go over my time. This is another way they die. There's a lot of ways they die. There's not an easy way to transition to this, so I'll just jump in. Frankenstein didn't have to worry about Lycra, though, or spandex. Stretch pants are just as dangerous to werewolves as highways. Libby's always careful to wear denim, and Darren wouldn't be caught dead in anything but jeans. Me either. The good thing about jeans is that they rip away. Not at the seams like you'd think. That yellow thread there is tough like fishing line. But in the center of the denim, where it's worn the thinnest, it sucks always having to buy new ones or finding ones at the salvage store with long enough legs, but that's just part of being a werewolf. A pair of tights, though, man, pantyhose are murder. Libby'd only heard about this, never seen it, but supposedly what can happen is you've wriggled into a pair of hose or tights. Except for color, I really don't understand the difference between the two. And then, over the course of the day, there's such a constant annoyance that you kind of forget about them altogether. Enter night then. Begin the transformation. Where pants will tear away, split over the thigh and calf, burst at the waist, no matter how double riveted they are, your fancy pantyhose, your stretch pants, they wolf out with you. I'd imagine you look kind of stupid with your legs all sheer and shiny, but anybody who laughs, you just rip their throat out. Feast on their heart, problem solved. At least until morning when you shift back. Just like that tick that impacted itself into Grandpa's skin, a pair of pantyhose, they'll retract with your legs. Except instead of one tick embedding itself in your skin, flaring into some infection, this time every hair is pulling something back in with it. What happens is your skin, your human skin, is part pantyhose now. Like the hose have melted onto you, but deeper than deep. And because you just used all your calories shifting back, it's not easy like on television. And because you're hurt now, you probably can't go back to wolf yet. Can't get tough enough to sustain this kind of all-over injury. Worse, this isn't an immediate death. You linger through the day. If your family, your werewolf family, if they really love you, they'll end it for you. If you're alone, then it's hours of trying to pull those pantyhose up from your bloody skin. It's fine, slippery threads of that hose ducking into your veins and getting pumped higher into your body. If you're lucky, one of those clumps makes its way to your brain. If you're not lucky, then you end up trying to use your human teeth to peel up all the skin from the top of your thigh, the back of your calf, wherever you can reach. It doesn't help. I don't know what the coroner calls these kind of deaths. Probably drug psychosis. Obvious enough to him that a blood test isn't even necessary. Look at this trailer, this living room, how they were living. Look at how she was picking at her skin. Bag her up, team, and drop a match on your way out. But there's another way we die too. The oldest way, maybe, which is in the rest of the book. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. That was really terrific. My name is Deborah Miranda. I'm from the Ohlone, Coastano, and Esalen Nation of the Greater Monterey Bay area, so I am a long way from home right now. Never in a million years did I think I would be standing here at an Indigenous panel in the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is a city that's been the source of a lot of devastating legislature for Native Americans. Legislature that was meant to separate Native people from our lands, our cultures, and even our lives. My own people, a conglomeration of California Indian tribes, were on the receiving end of nearly $2 million of bonds approved by Congress to fund extermination of tribes in California that were blocking various kinds of American expansion. So our population plummeted from about 1 million pre-contact to 5 to 10,000 150 years later. A lot of that was funded right here in Washington, D.C. But the good news is I'm here, and we are here. And a large part of that is due to some pretty innovative survival techniques. So we're still here and we're still telling stories. My first question that I have for this crew here, I was thinking about something that Elizabeth Cookland said. She's a Lakota, Crow Creek Lakota native poet and writer, and she said that any nation that does not tell its own stories cannot actually say, claim that status of being a nation. If you let somebody else tell your stories, then you've already lost. And I was wondering what you think about that statement from Liz, who is a fairly well-known person as well as writer. So what do you think about that saying?
I guess I pretty much always disagree with everything she says, so I'll probably disagree with it, finally.
I think the word people use for her is polemic, but that's the polite word. Eric, how about you?
Well, it generally seems very extreme, and I think that's kind of, that's sort of her signature. And there's just so much more nuance in what we do that I think that it doesn't really leave a lot of room for other people.
Mm-hmm.
That's the trick. The leaving room is the hard part, because people always want to build like exclusive clubs on top of the mountain that only certain people can get into. And it seems like a lot of her stuff does that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to say something, but I can't figure out how the microphone works. Oh, I bet it's this thing. Do you think so?
It's not a lightsaber.
Yeah.
It's on the
I can
bottom.
borrow this one. I can use this one.
There you go.
All righty, thank you so much. I wonder if perhaps what she is saying is what, you know, she certainly never met my dad, who lived way up in northern Minnesota there, but what he used to tell us in experiences that we were having, and some were great and some were not so great, and but he would always say, make it your own. And so you know, just kind of take it and make it part of the greater experience, and whether you actually purposely tell a story or not, these things do become part of the larger story. I'm not sure what he would have said if he read this quote, but I think he would have encouraged us to remember, to always remember, and that at some point the time will be right to make it yours, use it for the best way, and perhaps pass it on.
Well, I think that's a great point, because I think what Cookland forgets there is that sometimes Native people are put in a position where they are not allowed to speak, cannot speak, and so you don't speak because you need to save your life, right? Stephen, what were you going to say?
I was going to say that I do usually disagree with Cook Lynn on pretty much everything, but I'm glad she's out there, because she gives us like a rallying point to negatively define ourselves against, you know, which is fun. I like that, you know. You can drop anything she says in any conversation, and you got 3 hours of conversation after that, you know, which is good, I think. I'm glad she's doing what she's doing. She's not here, is she?
Would it matter? I have a feeling. That's why they took your knife away. Okay. My second question is one that I stole from Monacan poet Karen Wood, who's here today. And she said that she asked Sherman Alexie this question and it stumped him, and that he got away without really answering it. So the question is, what is the biggest risk you've ever taken as a writer? And that's the tricky part, as a writer, not as a person. What's the biggest risk?
Writing nonfiction.
Okay. How come?
Okay. I think there's a reason that I went to fiction, and I found it was easier to tell the story with that little barrier, that little veil between me as the person responsible for this particular story at this particular time, and then whoever reads it or hears it or receives it in some way. And so I actually I really haven't had the guts yet to take that the risk of writing nonfiction, though I might.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, nonfiction is scary. It's like just standing in front of everybody and slowly taking all your clothes off. You know, it's a weird thing. I don't understand. Nonfiction it's wonderful and fun, but it's so difficult and scary. The biggest risk I've taken, I guess I'm still taking it. When I first started out writing, my publishers wanted to. They said, "Hey, you're American Indian," and I said, "Yeah." And it wasn't that interesting to me, you know, but it was interesting to them. It's a marketing hook, you know.
Right.
And they said, why don't you go by your family's name, Calf Looking? And they said, that'll sell books. That's exotic. And I thought, well, I do want to sell books, but then I thought also that it'd be a much bigger coup if I can make it as a boring old Jones. You know, then it's all on my writing ability or inability or whatever. You know, whereas if I were still a Calf Looking, then I would always be wondering, are people picking up my book because that looks like a whole sentence, or what? I mean, what is it? You know? So I'm still taking that.
So you're not William Least Heat movie?
No.
All right. Eric.
I think I probably did it unaware, and that was to kind of recognize at some point that I was writing about the nuances of very small tribal politics, and that not really speak to a larger audience in its nuances. I worked very briefly for the Administration for Native Americans, and this is how I discovered how insular my work was. That I was working in my, you're doing grant reading, and one of the employees came up and knocked at my door and said, "Can we speak to you for a minute?" And I thought, "Oh, what have I done now?" And I said, "Well, you are affiliated with 2 of the only 3 tribes that refuse to have a relationship with the federal government. Can you tell us why?" And I didn't realize that. I guess I had assumed, when you're deeply inside of something, you assume that many other groups are along those same lines. So I did inadvertently. I just wrote about very, very insular tribal politics.
Okay, and that was a risk because of readership and interest?
Yeah, I think probably it's too obscure for a general reader, and I think the community I'm from is probably mortified that I wrote about such insular things. So I think I wrote a book for 4 people.
Ooh, that's true. That's risky, all right. In many ways. Okay. So my next question I'm going to steal from Dorothy Allison. This is the question that she always asks during her workshops. What is the story you cannot die without telling? What is the story still ahead that you haven't yet?
That's terrifying, because this werewolf one is the one I always wanted to tell. So that means I'm like,
oh no,
I'm gonna die now.
You're ready. The rapture is upon you. All right, Linda, any ideas?
What I'm working on now, maybe, which is another part of the story that continues the fictional extended family up at the fictional Mauget Point Reservation in northern Minnesota, which brings us into some really, really difficult issues having to do with foster homes and out-of-home placements and experiences. And so, I certainly hope I live long enough to finish this. Yeah. It's a story that I would like to tell. I'm not the only person with a story like that I can tell. But that's what I hope to do.
Okay. Anything coming to mind?
I think that I'm kind of in the process of doing it. I usually, when I'm starting a new project, I look to see what I've been avoiding. Because I find as a writer that where I'm most tense is probably where the most interesting material is going to come from. And after several novels, I realized that I was writing a pattern of childhood, early adulthood, and there was this whole gap of 7 years of middle school to high school that were just so traumatizing and horrifying that I pretended they did not exist for most of my career. And so gradually over the last few years, I've been working on it. And it's tough. It's tougher than I thought it was going to be, because you have to relive some of it. But then at the same time, it seems like it's also some of the material that's been most important to me, that I guess it dwells most inside, and I've been refusing to let it out.
And then, go ahead.
We should make a writing team, because I write really good from like 12 years old to 17 years old.
There you go. Well, that's interesting, the whole conversation there, because I really think writing what we're most afraid of is kind of the whole point of writing, right? So.
You know what I'm most afraid of is people with dog heads. That terrifies me. Like that's my nightmare. I'm gonna walk around a corner and walk into a chest, and I'm gonna be like, "Excuse me, sir." I'm gonna look up and there's gonna be a dog head there. That's gonna be the end of it, But that's why I write about werewolves, because that's basically what they are. I keep thinking if I write it on the page well enough for myself, that I can move on to the next thing. But it just makes it more real and more scary.
It's supposed to capture it, provide some safety there. Last question here, I think, and then we'll do Q&A. I wanted to know, I know that you're all teachers. You all teach writing in some way. And I'm wondering, A, how does teaching creative writing affect you as a writer? Or B, you can pick, you have options here. B, does being somebody who identifies as Indigenous and probably teaches mostly non-Indigenous students, how does that affect your writing, if it does?
I don't teach creative writing.
Oh, okay.
No, that's fine. I teach a variety of American Indian Studies classes, and one of them is a literature class. But yeah, it is true that where I work, most of the students are non-native. And how does that affect my writing? In some ways I think it perhaps strengthens it and even perhaps eases it, knowing that there are stories that can be told, that must be cared for and protected, and then perhaps passed on in that way. And so I also think that I perhaps gain a little bit of understanding of some things in the world outside of Indian country through reading the papers that my students write. It's a real eye opener, and also a real privilege and a treat a lot of times to read their perceptions and what they have taken out of a novel and want to give back to me as of course the problem is that students who really want to please me, their grade doesn't depend on their pleasing me, but how to
but they might think
convince them
it does.
of this. That's right. And so the perceptions of those students, I think that it's a great help. I hadn't thought about that till you asked that. So yeah, thank you for asking. I'm going to go read some more papers.
Wow, that's the first time that's happened. Eric, how about you?
I would say that I was kind of unaware that I was writing from an Indigenous perspective at first. I was not a particularly avid reader, and I probably started reading because it was the era pre-VCR, and so the only way to relive movies was to read these really terrible novelizations that were made from horror films. And I wandered into picking up Carrie and Salem's Lot, thinking they were novelizations. And I thought, wow, these are way better than a lot of those others. And so that kind of was the beginning of my desire to be a writer, was having discovered Stephen King. And in college, I had written a novel and shown it to my creative writing professor. And I thought I had really written like a Stephen King-ish novel. And when he handed it back, he said, wow, that was a really fascinating novel about the reservation, but what were those monsters doing? And it was a very illuminating moment. Like, I had no idea that I had, in fact, already started to internalize that story and refract it. And so at that point, I said, I guess this is what I'm writing. And the monsters have kind of gradually, they wander back in every now and then, but mostly after his comment, I saw that my family offered me such riches to tell about that I wanted to do their stories right.
Yeah, it's the same for me. Like when I write about a zombie who comes and messes up Sunday dinner, it's really the time my uncle got drunk and came to see us. But I'll try to tackle the first part of the question. Teaching creative writing, how does that impact my writing? It makes me have to be accountable, because I tell my students, I just try to condition them such that they spell okay with 4 letters, not 2 letters. And they don't knit their prose together with just and though and but. Just all this whole litany of things that I think produces better writing. So then when I'm at my own keyboard doing my stuff, I'll notice if I use just like 3 times in a paragraph, I'm like, man, Caitlin from class is going to see that, and I've got to be better. And so I think it makes me better.
Yeah.
It makes me a more aware writer anyways. And I think the more aware you can be on the page, the better off you are, finally.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, at this point, we're going to open it up to questions and answers from the audience. And we're going to have a microphone that goes around. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and we'll bring the mic to you.
Anybody have questions?
I'd love to know who have been your particular individual inspirations in your lives when you were young as readers, and then when you were actually thinking about constructing literature. And those are maybe 2 different things, but who have been your inspiration as reader and as writer?
I was kind of the reader kid. I mean, even though I was not a particularly huge reader, like everybody in my family hated reading, so that I liked it at all was kind of an anomaly. And I discovered that I was like the Cliff Notes for my cousins. They didn't want to read their books. They knew I read books, so they asked me to read their books and tell them what it was they were supposed supposed to have read for class. And I discovered The Red Pony and To Kill a Mockingbird very early, and this young adult novel called The Pig Man.
Oh, yeah, I read that.
Yeah, and I just found that I was being moved by them, that I really wanted to meet these characters, and then it was that kind of love of Stephen King after discovering, that you could do something beyond the novelization. And I had the tremendous luxury of, right as I was beginning to be serious about writing, Love Medicine came out. So I was 19 when Love Medicine came out, and I thought, oh, well, this is what you can do. And so Louise Erdrich's, her first novel was a really defining moment for me as a writer.
I started out, by the time I was 12, I had read all of Louis L'Amour's novels up until that time. There were 95 of them, and I thought they were the best. I thought they were true. They were gospel. They're not exactly best friends of the Indian or anything, but I loved them. I loved them, and I read all the novelizations too, the horror movies. I remember seeing inside Jason Voorhees' head was so cool and everything. But then, I graduated. I don't know what graduated. Graduated to just a hierarchy. I moved laterally into Pynchon, I guess, Thomas Pynchon, and then Thomas Pynchon was a gateway to Gerald Visner, and then from tracking down Gerald Visner, everybody around him, I did. It sounds corny that I would say Love Medicine too, but Love Medicine really was a transformative work for a lot of us, I suspect, and it did hit me hard. I've read that book a lot of times trying to figure out its peculiar magic. I don't think I've figured it out yet. And yeah, Stephen King too, definitely. Philip K. Dick, Vonnegut. And just every comic books too. I grew up on comic books, and I still read comic books all the time. If I could draw, I wouldn't have any novels published because I'd be trying to do comic books.
My inspiration, I guess, would be the stories that I listened to and eavesdropped on when I was a child, because I was one of those kids who read a lot, but was also directed to get my nose out of the book and go outside and play. And then I would hang around and eavesdrop, and so probably annoyed the adults very much. But that became like reading a book for me, and I've always loved reading. I mean, I read everything I saw when I was a child. My uncle was one of my uncles was a janitor in our school district, and he actually was supposed to be disposing of a bunch of old books, and a ton of them were about Russia during the Tsar time, novels, history books, and he was supposed to toss them out or incinerate them or whatever, and he brought them up to our house. And so when I was a kid, I had a great time reading those. He brought me a big box of Reader's Digest from the 40s and 50s, and I loved reading those too. I love Agatha Christie. I love Louise Erdrich's stuff, and for me, the Erdrich book for me was Tracks when it came out, and Fleur Pillager. So I love to listen and to read, and eventually, after a while, I started to write them, I guess.
That compulsion to read, I had that too when I was a kid. I would run out of Reader's Digest, so I'd go to my grandma's kitchen and spin her Lazy Susan, and it would stop, and I'd pull out a can of soup, and I'd read everything on that soup can. Yeah, then I'd do the beans, and then I'd move on down I just had to be reading. If I wasn't taking in words, I didn't feel like I belonged on the planet,
I'm a great believer in the transformative power of humor. You are a very literate group. I wonder if any of you has a George Custer joke.
I'm not sure it's a joke, but a major setting for this novel that I just read from, and it's a major plot point as well, is a stand these kids take against an ice cream stand called Custard's Last Stand.
Do you have a Custer joke?
I don't have a Custer joke.
I don't have a Custer joke, but I did read a book about Custer that was a big little book. Does anybody know what those are? From a long time ago, and we had a box of those too. And at some point, George Custer's wife and her friends were afraid of being attacked by Indians, and somebody told them if they pretended they were drunk that the Indians were really afraid of drunk women. I thought, well, of course. Anyway, I was kind of fascinated by that part in the book, and I can't help it, I still laugh about it, and I don't know where it came from. You need to put that in something you write, because it can't be true.
Yeah.
Hi. This week begins Indigenous Week at the United Nations. There are a lot of events going around, Indigenous people around the world. Do you see your writing reflecting Indigenous issues outside of Native America and the United States, like border issues in any kind of way related to those other movements of Indigenous people?
I do think a lot of the concerns and issues that Native people face in America, they're not all the same across the whole globe, I don't think, but I think some of them are. Appropriation, thievery, all that stuff. I think it's not the same everywhere, but if you reduce it to a thumbnail enough, some of it probably transfers, I suspect. But I don't know what my work does.
Your writing in any kind of way,
Oh, and I don't do it, not intentionally for me. If it happens, it's a complete happy accident,
Well, my grandparents and their siblings all went to Carlisle Indian School, and I have to say that in Canada they've recognized and at least admitted that the attempt of the residential schools was cultural genocide, and the United States has refused to make that admission. So in that way, my work it kind of draws on that a lot, and their experiences and the ramifications I see in my family and friends from home 2 generations later. And so I think that do I wish the U.S. would rise up and actually admit that that's true? Yeah.
I don't know what they would say then. What would they say next?
Well,
I can't imagine
that's part of the
that.
problem,
Yeah.
is that there would have
Yeah.
to be some
What
kind
would
of
they
further
say?
response.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did that.
Yeah, I know. So I write a lot about, this is my research field, is effects of policies, boarding school policies, and the boarding school era and termination era policies on individuals and families, and so I see these kind of the destruction of people and the destruction through policies that people invent that they say were done with the best of intentions. I just have a really hard time swallowing that one, and so I see that worldwide. And I parallel, when I'm thinking of things and writing about things, I often parallel them to, well, at that point in history, say, what was my grandmother doing? And I think about the terrible destruction that has been brought, and how, just a regular woman just living her life, having her children taken away from her, and all the things. And this isn't only my family's story; it's many families' stories. And so, if it's many families' stories in the world that I know, what stories are like this worldwide? How do we keep? And I guess I can say we human beings. How do we keep hurting other people in the name of what we have decided is a righteous thing?
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.